Great. Well, I'm excited for week two to kind of start to expound upon some of the things that we talked about last week. We had originally kind of planned on. I had mentioned last week that we were going to talk about some of the key concepts, a list that you had kind of created of some important ideas, kind of, well, key concepts, some things that would be important for ourselves to make sure that we're really clear about, but then also potentially other people viewing it. As we've kind of discussed, it seems like that we're kind of wanting to adjust and change, and so to just kind of dive right in, I don't want to take any time with anything unnecessary. Um, let's kind of get into some of the things or I guess break down for me what it is that you've been thinking and some of the ideas that you've been having over the last week and, go from there.
Yeah, you're right. We had a plan, and I think that the beauty of this, the way that we've started is it's kind of like I haven't found, I don't think you have, I won't speak for you, but we haven't
Nope.
found anybody that's really done this.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, well, I mean, how do we take stuff that the big heavy hitters, you know, Jordan Peterson always come to mind, and it's like, how do you take the stuff that he's done and broken it down seamlessly in my view, and try to make it even more granular. And I think that's really, really hard. Um, to give everybody a peek behind the curtain, yeah, we talked Friday, I think, about what does this actually look like? And I was sitting here, kind of stressed out for the last week, trying to go, I don't know, like where you start. If we're like, let's figure out the meaning of life and solve all of our problems, like what where do you start? I don't know where point 1A is. So I think that's kind of what I've been going through. I think that maybe you agree with that.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm with you.
okay. So I think the hard part is, we're trying to establish some structure, some foundation to a lot of these terms and ideas that I think we wheel and deal with every day. And it's really hard to do that, to really drill down and find, what do these things mean? And I think that trying
Well,
to
if
build
I
this
can
structure.
interrupt you real quick, when we both kind of said this a few times, I guess what do we refer to when we say these things, right? What are we talking about in terms of the point of you trying to give us some structure, but what structure for what?
Yeah, good question. I think that gets to the heart of it, is trying to put your finger on exactly what we're talking about. Really, I think the way I would describe this is we're talking about concepts, ideas, philosophies, scriptural, like doctrinal things that essentially try to give us the good life. And I talk about good with a capital G.
Yeah,
We're trying to do good things. And it's hard to figure out exactly, like, to build a system or a guide or a pattern to say, this is what you need to do in order to have the good life. And um, it, it, it almost I feel like I'm still dancing around the idea because this really is a work in progress for me, but it's
yeah,
hard to say, in order to find joy and be good and to believe the things you ought to believe, that you have to start with this one thing. I just don't know if you can do that. So trying to establish a structure, like a guide path, when I'm thinking, like, for my kids one day when they turn like 12 and they're trying to figure out, what ought I to be doing? It's easy to say, well, just go read the scriptures.
right.
Well, duh. Yeah, you have to read the scriptures, and that's an integral part of this. But what exactly should they be doing? What are these patterns that need to be followed?
Right.
It's hard. So I think trying to just say that there's structure and we can kind of drill this down and produce these key concepts. It's hard to have structure without substance. And in order to put the substance together, you need structure. So it's the circular problem that I think I find myself going through, and maybe you do, and maybe a lot of other
Absolutely.
people do too. So hopefully, does that kind of answer the question?
No, yeah, I think yes. Yes, the question was more to just define, and I appreciate that you said the good life, because I'll be honest, even as you said that, it's like you had asked me a question earlier, and I'm sure, and this is a whole nother conversation, but you had said, what's a liberal? And anybody who's watching this is probably thinking the same thing I thought, which is, I mean, I know what that is, but I couldn't
Yeah.
definitively say this is what a liberal is, right? And you even saying, what is the good life? It's like, it's that's it. I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what you're talking about. And I think to your point, giving it some, or at least defining it in a way of how we could, the things we need to do to create or build or sustain habits, a lifestyle, certain things that could create or lead to the good life, that's that's a great place for us to kind of start. I think that that at least answers a question for me of, well, what, as we've kind of discussed a little bit, how do we actually start to apply maybe some abstract ideas and concepts like we've mentioned now into our life to make it actually substantive, but this now kind of adds that. So yes, it does answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, and so to add some context to that question of what is a liberal, it was less of a a politically like inflammatory question.
Right.
I think the point that I was, yeah, you're getting to it, and I think that it's a good analogy. When you ask someone, um, what is this complicated term, complex term mean? I think that you're going to get various answers, but really what I'm trying to really pull from that or tease out is if I ask you what is a liberal, I think you have to start asking, is it a person? Is it an ideology? Is it a person within an ideology? Is it an abstract thing that's really not like tangible? Is it tangible, or is it a series of like philosophical and moral and ethical pieces that have all been interwoven to produce a lifestyle or a way that we view the world? And it's hard to just say, hey, if I give you 15 things, 50 or 15 concepts, define them and show you what they are, that's not actually going to help you be able to answer some of those questions. I mean, me
Correct.
neither.
Right.
I think the other thing, the other analogy I use is it's like we need tools. We need tools to find these patterns. And if I just give you concepts that are like almost platitudes, um, it's like rather than giving you a hammer to hammer in a two by four, I've given you a tree that's still in the ground. It needs to be cut down. It needs to be cut into pieces, and then it needs to be cut into two by fours, which then are cut to size, actually framed. It's way too it's missing the mark. So I think that it's going to be hard for us to just say, here's a list of concepts, and here they're going to help you for whatever reason. I
Right.
just don't know if that's right. So I have a different proposal. I think there's a few ways to actually start building maybe a framework, if that's the word that I think that's
Yeah.
right, the
Yeah.
framework to really do this. To give you, a little more background on why I was thinking that, I was talking to a friend, and the friend said, "Well, why don't you just jump in and start listening to Jordan Peterson?" And I was like, "Well, that's kind of what I did after I got through undergrad." Um, Problem is, even with an undergraduate level of like, I mean, philosophy and political theory, like, man, it's still drinking from a hose.
Totally.
He's brilliant. I have said for years that he is like the Nietzsche of our generation. He's a big philosopher of our generation.
Sure.
So that is really hard to just jump in and start thinking about. It's overwhelming and intimidating. So I think what maybe would be a better idea is we find maybe patterns that we're seeing out in society. We address them, name them, and then start to break down some of the pieces that are affiliated or like that build up that pattern. And then we actually have tools.
Yeah.
Now we know how to analyze, we know how to critique, we know how to talk about and articulate the objections and the belief systems of the thing that we're criticizing. So I think that's a better way to do it.
And then kind of, yes, have the tools so that then as we go into some of maybe the the concepts that we've created that are important, we actually know how to extrapolate important pieces or details or something like that. That's kind of your intention, if I'm understanding correct, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Because if we do it, I mean, the vocabulary is important. The vocabulary is just vocabulary. If you don't know how to apply the vocabulary, or actually be able to identify something that falls into that category, there's just not much value there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could sit and, put on whatever kind of soapbox about this is what X, Y, and Z terms are, and here's why they matter. It's like, well, to what benefit and how does that help me actually identify what's going on? So I think that is an oversimplified thing of the way I was thinking about it, but I've never done this before, and I'm not topping out or being like, oh, it's okay, but this is going to be a working project for both of us
Yeah.
for the next probably forever because there's so many things to try to tackle, which is part of the intimidation. But I think that hopefully, to my kids and anybody else that is watching this, I'm not trying to be a know-it-all. I'm not holding myself out to be an expert. In fact, I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to learn as I'm going and then be able to convey some of the truths that I think I've found to, the next generation and most importantly, to our kids. So um,
Well,
that's where I'm at.
yeah, no, I think to your point, and this is actually something that it makes sense. I guess I'm seeing what you're trying to say better. Mom had said something when she and I were doing a video the other day. She had said, I'm excited about what you guys are doing because as you guys mentioned, as you had said, or as we had kind of talked about, we're preparing for battle. And part of the issue and what she had said was is to me, you in doing this, you are polishing and sharpening your weapons, right? But
Yeah,
giving information, right? Like teaching someone maybe how to fight isn't the most effective thing. Maybe it's you need to start with, no, how do you armor yourself correctly so that when you do have to fight, you can actually do it effectively? Because if you don't know how your armor, how your weapons work, then going out and swinging an axe isn't going to be very beneficial. But knowing how
yep.
to use your axe effectively is something that and I get maybe it's not a perfect analogy for what you're going for, but
I
that's
see
kind
what
of
you're
what
saying.
I'm seeing as you're saying the tools, equipping the right battle gear for what's coming, for what we're trying to be prepared for.
Yeah. And in order to, yeah, I think that fits right in with what I'm saying. In order to be able to do that, we have to have perspective and the ability to recognize, are we actually in a fight? And who are we fighting? What is the fight about? Are we is it a mis are we misconstruing the battle or the fight when inherently I'm like, well, I'm ready to, put up my dukes and go at it. But I don't know if it's that. I think it's there's a spiritual and cultural decay that's going on in Western civilization, and maybe I'm just awakened to it now. And so we have to really frame this the right way and not frame it not like the framework, but do we have the right perspective on this? Um, so I think we're saying, yeah, that is closely aligned with what I'm saying. And in order to effectively do the thing that you're suggesting is we have to tailor the perspective the right way.
Yeah,
So hopefully that adds some clarification of that.
totally. Yep.
And I've
So
okay.
I mean,
Well,
I
I've
guess
got go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I mean, if you've got other things you want to kind of say as an intro to it, then we could do that. Otherwise, I'd let's dive into some of your thoughts here in terms of
Yeah.
those actual the actual
Okay.
substance.
Yeah. So to get to the substance, I think there's a few different analogies you could say. I mean, it's like weaving a giant spider web.
Yeah,
We get to one thing like where does it actually begin and where does it end and what's connected to what? Well, really, it's all connected together. It's woven together. Or it's like pulling a bar like a yarn of string or a ball of yarn. The more you pull, the more you pull, like the more you find.
right.
So it's really hard and it's going to require us to do a lot of like spiral thinking. Like we're starting here in the abstract and we start to narrow and hone in on some of these things. But then we need to be able to unwind the spiral too and get back to the abstract. That is really going to be I oversimplified originally when I was like, let's give foundation before substance. I don't you just can't. So into the substance, well, see, before I get to substance, the more I'm like, well, let's talk about what we're going to do, or at least what I think has helped me. And what I would, advocate to my kids is this is what's worked for me.
Yeah.
I've listed 5 things I think on
Yeah.
our document. So I think the first thing is you have to read a lot of books, and like seriously a lot of them.
Yeah.
And it's not like sci-fi Star Wars stuff. Like that is actually great. And there's a lot of there being things like we're doing. You have to start figuring out who are the people that are kind of experts in this area? What are they advocating for? What is the lesson that we need to draw from it? And what should be my takeaways? Did I lose you?
There we go. We're back. Maybe.
So I lost my train of thought for a second, but I'm sure I'll find it. I think the reason we read is there are so many other people out there that know so much more than we do. Not as in like an intimidating way, but I heard Scott Adams. Maybe we talked about him last week. I don't know, but he was on Jordan Peterson's podcast, and he was talking about, I've been called to be an expert on several things, and he wasn't trying to pat himself on the back. He's kind of an interesting guy. I don't know if you've seen that
I
old
haven't.
Gilbert cartoon with
Oh,
it's awesome
yeah, maybe I have.
in the paper, like the
Yeah.
Sunday paper.
Yeah.
I remember looking for that as a kid. So um, he's not patting himself on the back and being like, oh, I'm an expert and thumping his chest. He's like, no, I have skills, and at this point, I can be called as an expert on this. But even so, I'm the humility, and I think the intellectual honesty he has is excellent. He says, if I were to take everything I know and total it together, numerically, or I don't know how you do that, but just
Sure.
quantify it and compare it against everything I don't know, and then try to take the percentage of things that I do know divided by how many I don't know. He's like, you're going to get a number so small. He's like, it's going to round down to zero. I was
Right.
like, man. So that kind of goes back to what we talked about last week, the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like you have a lot of, well, maybe not a lot. There are people out there that think they know a lot. They really don't. They act like they do.
Totally.
And he's one that knows a lot, but recognizes that there's a lot he doesn't. And he comes to a different conclusion of, I need to be careful on what I talk about and to what degree of certainty I do. So I think that being exposed to books gives you good perspective because it keeps you humble
Yeah.
and it keeps you honest. So I think that's one good one. And then my second thing is the AI tools we have now are they're whatever, regardless of what you think about them, they're neat because you can talk to them and have them reason against you, and prompt it to where it's like, don't use fallacious reasoning, bad logic, bad reasoning. I want you to, and you can call it out when it does, but it will reason against you, and you can have conversations at a high level or to whatever degree that you're at, and it will kind of teach you. It points out, some of the common arguments,
Yeah.
the shortcomings, and it does a good job exposing maybe the holes in your own thinking, which comes back to, the first point of what do you actually know and to what degree. So I think that's another good tool. It's something I use every day, all the time. So next thing, I think, to really establish this framework, we have to listen closely. Not to me, that's not what I'm
Right.
saying, but
Right.
to other people when you talk to them, not you being abstract,
Absolutely.
anyone, when you have a conversation, listen to what they're saying, how they're saying it, and the points that maybe they lean into and lean away from. I think that is, and being able to observe at that level is a skill. So I think the more you are exposed to other people and to the things that they believe, or like the arguments they're making, the more, one, it's going to help you build up their argument, even though you disagree, and two, recognize the shortcomings of your own, which helps you do what we call, rather than a straw man. Are you familiar with that concept?
I'm not sure I am.
So setting up a straw man it's one time of fallacious, it's a logical fallacy. you set up their argument in a way that's really weak to make it look like it's, for example, a scarecrow. And if I'm fighting a scarecrow, no duh, I'm going to win,
Right.
right? Instead, what we do is we steel man. We want to steel man their argument. We want to build it up strong to
Hmm.
where we take them down, and we really feel confident in our ability or in the outcome. For example, like in football, like we don't want to beat up on the FCS teams all the time. We want to play the top dogs. And once you
Right.
beat the top dogs and beat them, like, man, there might be something there.
Right.
So that's a bad analogy, but kind of conveys the point.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I think that, so moving to step four, I think that it's critical that we talk about, the scriptures. The scriptures identify patterns that you will see left and right when you study them thoroughly. And to what degree um, I think you're able to do that really depends on how well you fundamentally understand them, and really, rather than being surface level and platitude e, that's not a word, but what if you actually grasp the core, the actual substance, the fundamental like principles that are in there, you'll start to see that. And I think First Nephi 1:19, I think it's verse 3, tells us that we need to liken the scriptures unto ourselves, and I think that's a popular thing. But yeah, find those patterns and apply them into your own life. That will give you a good foundation of what you're up against. And lastly, we talked about it, but you do need to build your vocabulary. That's important because you need to be conversant in what we're talking about. But I just don't think that maybe that's as hard as I was making it out to be. You don't have to do that for 10 years. You got to do that like thoroughly. And when you see a new word, like Google it, read the definition 10 times, and then you'll probably have a decent understanding. And if you see it pop up again and you don't remember, do it again 10 times. You'll probably start to be able to build that. So I think for me, if I were to, tell my kids, if they were to say, how do I build this foundation? This is the stuff I would say.
And I guess to kind of recap, um, read a lot of good books, use the tools to discover more information, like you had mentioned, kind of AI, ChatGPT.
The internet
Listen,
generally, there's so much technology.
yeah, yeah. Listen closely, read the scriptures, and build your vocabulary. And if I may, I mean, part of I think the issue that we find, and maybe you would agree or see something different, is I don't think, I mean, I look at this list that you created and I don't see anything that's like, well, that's eye-opening. That you lifted the veil
Sure.
for me, right? That is new. I need
Right.
to do that, right? That is, gosh, you changed my life by just saying that. I think the problem really is, and I think this is something that all of these points relate to, as you said, unwind the spider web. And I think in a lot of senses, the problem everybody faces, or the core of the issue, is that it takes a lot of freaking work. It takes a lot of work to, I mean, do all of these. I mean, the classic statement, right, in business in general or I guess you could say principle is we're a product of the people we associate with and the books that we read, right? If we spend time around bad people, we're gonna, input, output. You spend time around good people, same thing. You read good books, right? And that you had specifically mentioned not reading sci-fi. Not that there's anything wrong with that stuff like you had mentioned, but it's if those things don't necessarily add a lot of value. And I would counter with the point, unless you're, we I remember being 12 or 13 and watching Lord of the Rings with dad for the first time and pausing the movie
Sure.
every
Yeah.
5 minutes because there was a new lesson to be taught. And at the time it was like this is I don't even remember what happened 30 minutes ago because we've spent 2 hours talking about, something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm really grateful. And those are actually very fond memories now of going, every time I watch those movies, I go, I remember dad teaching that. I remember dad talking about this. I remember, and now I can look back and say, dad took the time and the effort and the work to teach a 12, 15, I don't know exactly how old we were at the time, but
Yeah.
young teenage boys. And I think about those things often. I think about them regularly. But I guess, and maybe if you wouldn't mind expounding on that, is if someone wants to participate, if our kids someday are looking at this going, holy smokes, I've got to now do some, I've got to read books, and that's probably the hardest one just in and of itself. Read books, read the scriptures, those types of things. Why would someone put in the work to actually do it? Why would someone actually take the time maybe to follow these steps that you've now clearly laid out for us?
That gets, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the answer to that,
Yeah,
I think. Dad and I talk all the time about about responsibility.
yeah,
To what extent, where does it come from, and what is it? And yeah, you drilled it. Dad took a lot of responsibility. I I don't know how you quantify, but Dad knew and knows that there's a lot that if he sacrifices, there's a lot of good that can come out of that. And not only is he, I think as men, fathers, et cetera, whomever, because I mean, women and mothers too,
right.
if you sacrifice your time, your effort, your talents, your resources, and put them towards something good, the good that comes out later is significantly better than, whatever kind of pleasure that you're seeking now. We're going to spend a lot of time on that. Jordan Peterson, I think, nails this concept. And so, the call, maybe what's the call to action? Well, I think the first thing is we all have responsibilities, and that is something I will say is irrefutable. That's not something I'm willing to get off the box on. That is a hill that's really important. To what degree that is varies. So it's critical that we figure out what is our responsibility and to whom, and how do we fulfill that? And what's the consequence of if we don't? That is what I think you're right. This isn't a perspective shifting thing. But I think these are the tools that help us really get to what's our responsibility and how do we fulfill it.
Yeah, yes. And I think in I think the biggest problem in general is that we all know it. We all know we need to do it. It's the difference of going from, your head to your heart to your feet, understanding it to feeling that desire. Now I need to take action to then actually doing something about it.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's kind of, I mean, that's the whole purpose of doing this, right? Is it's nope, enough's enough in the sense of enough being complacent and let's do something to start taking action. And you've addressed it multiple times, but I mean, geez Louise, technical problems, us not necessarily knowing exactly where it's going to go, all of the imperfections with even just doing a video, of doing a podcast type format like this, we talked about before, our the video isn't even great, the audio's not even great, none of it's perfect, all of it's a work in progress. But I think you have to do something, like reiterating the point from the last one, right? We can't afford not to. We can't afford not to do
Yeah.
these
And I
things.
think,
Go ahead.
well, there's another piece to that too. Yes, that's exactly right. Complacency is, yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
There's also another group I think that maybe is even a further step, even deeper onto the away from responsibility. It's the people that are pursuing pleasure over responsibility, and we'll spend a lot of time on that. But this hedonist tendency, which essentially someone that pursues pleasure, if we've set seeking pleasure as our highest type of pursuit, our highest amount of good, we've got a problem. And there are some people out there, and it's hard to realize maybe what those things are. Is that, I mean, I won't even list things, but is that what we're prioritizing? Even if we're not complacent, are we just pursuing the wrong things?
Yeah.
So a reordering or a reprioritizing of our pursuits may also be necessary, myself included. So I think that, yeah, if you're complacent or pursuing the wrong things, we need to align. We need to get reoriented. We need to set the compass the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess in kind of closing, you kind of, I mean, call to action seems pretty clear what it is we need to do, but if you want to maybe tee us up for what what we could possibly expect you next, in our next one, what are we going to kind of dive into, do you think?
It, well, the honest answer is I haven't. It's going to take me a little more time to really lock it down, but probably a pattern that I'm probably going to follow is let me find a pattern that I see that I can observe in the wild, right?
Yeah.
Just out there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's title it. Let's address what's going on within that pattern. And then once we get into why, we think that's a problem, we're going to have to explain why. We're going to have to define some vocabulary. And then we're going to have to say, well, this is what we actually need to be doing. I think, we just read that book. When you're talking about concepts, we have to frame it the right way. We have to say, this is what it's about. This is the thing that we're talking about. And it's either this or it's a number of like rejectionist or revisionist views. So I think that, but that's hard and it's going to take a lot of discussion and thinking about it. But
Yeah.
you can probably count on some kind of, I don't know, agenda like that from me.
Yeah. No, that's great. I look forward to learning right along with everybody else. But until next week, thanks for
Okay.
doing this again.
Yep. See ya.